And yes, it was probably a bit of ego and curiosity to do a solo dive. But as I've tried to explain people, which sometimes seems difficult for them to get, is that when you dive with someone else, and it is a two-person submersible, it's a very different experience to dive with a passenger. Your risk profile gets lower. You have to be much more conservative on your dives because you're responsible for the crew first and foremost. Just me and the sub, I wondered what the experience would be like. No one had ever dived the Titanic solo. How eerie would it be? But I was a bit naive too. It was the most dangerous dive I ever did.
From NEPM Studio 61A aboard Battleship Iowa, it's Scuttlebutt, the official podcast of the National Museum of the Surface Navy, in affiliation with the Surface Navy Association's Battleship Iowa chapter. And today, we're chatting with someone absolutely extraordinary. He's our 2025 Freedom of the Seas Award recipient. Let's get to know Victor Vescovo.
I'm profoundly pleased to be here and chat with you, Victor. I really am. I literally grew up reading the National Geographic magazines in the barbershop and just, completely becoming engrossed in that and to both meet you. And then just a few years ago, of course, we did an exhibit with Bob Ballard, the discoverer of the Titanic. And
he's a good friend.
Called up. Yeah, he's a great guy. He called up one night. We were on the ship and said, "Hey, I'm coming over bringing a friend." And here he comes with James Cameron. And we were standing on top of turret 3 with a beverage and just chatting and actually discussing with the two people that would most know the size of the relative size of the Bismarck turret, of course, the famous German battleship. So I just had the pleasure and really the privilege to meet so many great people, and I love the inspiration discussions as well. That's really where my heart's been most of my life.
Right.
Well, I got to say, I think Mike and I are both excited to be here. I've told a few people in the crew that I was sitting down to talk with you today, and I kind of got this, and I had the same moment when we went to announce you as the Freedom of the Seas Award recipient. I was like, okay, who's this person? When I read your bio, I was like, how do I not know about him? All the things that you have done are right up my alley. So my question to you is, are you purposely under the radar?
Well, in some respects, yes. I don't do the things I've done to seek notoriety. I really don't. I do them because I love the technical challenges. I like the missions. And yes, I've given interviews and we've had people on board ship recording what has happened or reporting out in the media. But that's mainly because I was happy with even just a little bit of reporting, but I don't actively seek it. That's not what this is about. And that's not kind of how I am. I tend to be much more, closed in terms of how I deal with the outside world. I just like doing the missions and I like building technology.
I like that. I respect that a lot. How did you get started? So you're originally from Dallas. That's a great seafaring town. How did you end up so nautical?
Not really, although Texas has a reputation for breeding a lot of people that like to do exotic things outside the flatlands, whether it's mountaineering. The first person to climb the 7 summits was from Dallas. And of course, we have the wonderful Admiral Chester Nimitz, who is from Fredericksburg, Texas. So we have a long lineage of people that go off and do other things. But my personal story really started in Dallas, where I was raised, even though for about a year, when I was 3 years old, I grew up in Connecticut, which is why I talk like I do. That's where I learned how to talk. So I never really talk like a Texan, although I can if I'm watching a Cowboys game and I'm very upset. But the lineage of my career has basically been along 3 axes. I've had a pretty robust private career in business, whether it's in consulting, investment banking, and lately private equity and venture capital. And that relatively successful career gave me the ability to pursue another pillar of my experience, which has been in exploration, starting off in high altitude mountaineering for several decades, and then migrating into the oceans and doing all the things that I've done there, including marine research dives into a whole host of deep ocean trenches, but also doing some wreck discovery, which many in the Navy community know me for. And then the third leg was in the U.S. Navy for 20 years as a Navy Reserve officer in intelligence. I was approached when I was 26 years old in business school, and because of some language capability and some other experiences I've had, the Navy gave me a direct commission in intelligence as a targeting officer, because I'm also a civilian pilot, and that allows me to interact with the air crews pretty well. And then since one of my languages was Arabic, after 9/11, I became cross-trained in counterterrorism. So I did counterterrorism for the next 8 or 9 years. So I've had a very differentiated career along many different dimensions, and that's allowed me to see and experience a lot of different and wonderful things.
What was your favorite part of working in the Navy?
It was the actual work that was most interesting. Being an intelligence officer, especially in the mid-ranks, around 03 to 04, lieutenant commander, you were usually right in the thick of things, very often on the intelligence staffs of admirals, even up to 4 stars, delivering to them the processed intelligence that you obtained from raw information. And you see just how vital intelligence is to formulating the plans that even 4 stars are contemplating. I was directly involved in the targeting efforts and intelligence collection during the Kosovo War, which was arguably the first war ever run completely with air power. And every day we were doing the target packages, briefing the bomb damage assessments, briefing the admiral every day. What do we strike next? How do we minimize civilian casualties? And in many respects, you're the pivot point for almost everything that's happening. And because you're an intel and you have clearances, you see almost everything. So it was just incredibly fascinating to be part of that. And I also served on the Nimitz, doing airstrikes in southern Iraq, and also on the Blue Ridge in the Western Pacific, doing war planning for Korea and China. So it was an incredibly fascinating career that gave me a lot of insight into how the military and political structures work together and what's important to them, and how unreliable intelligence can actually be.
Can you give us an example of something being unreliable?
Well, you learn in the first several years of becoming an intelligence officer, when you're training under other people, is that you tend to react very quickly to a lot of information, raw information that comes through the different channels that we have, whether it's signals intelligence, optical intelligence, human intelligence. And you learn over time, never believe the first thing you hear. There's an immense amount of noise. And I think as you progress in the ranks in the intelligence business, you discover that there is a quite high noise to signal ratio. And you learn that you really have to get multiple sources of information, all saying the same things from different vectors to truly believe it and give an informed decision. And I think that's what differentiates good intelligence officers from the not so good.
Wow.
Good advice.
I'll give a great example. For the Battle of Midway, which is one of the best intelligence successes of U.S. Navy history, where we decoded the Japanese war plan for the Battle of Midway. They had all this intelligence, but they had to get it confirmed. And that's when they did the brilliant operation to say that the water condensers on Midway Island had failed. And then that went through the Japanese code system, and then they picked it up. And then they were able to absolutely determine, no, we're right, it's going to be Midway that they're going to go after. That kind of verification based on initial intelligence that wasn't perfect is the epitome of what we try to do in the intelligence service.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. I knew about the planes that accidentally stumbled onto the fleet, but I didn't realize they had confirmed that before the battle.
Oh, yeah, we, the U.S. Navy fleet, our 3 fleet carriers, were literally laying in wait, in ambush, in the area of the Pacific where we were pretty sure the Japanese would not expect them to come from. And one could argue that that allowed us to surprise the Japanese and sink 3 of their carriers on our first wave of attacks. And it was just an extraordinary intelligence and tactical achievement by the pilots, the carriers, everyone involved. But it was a team effort, but it was started with decoding and then understanding exactly what the Japanese plan was when they had no idea we were even there or knew anything about what they were doing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was. And it was very fortunate. After 9/11, I was mobilized, and I actually served in Pearl Harbor. And the building I actually worked in was the same one where they did those intelligence operations in World War II. So it's always quite impactful when you're walking the same hallways that your predecessors did, not just in the same area, but the same business.
Yeah, we have a little bit of that here with, when we walk into the captain's cabin and we think about the D-Day invasion being planned in there. So definitely that same goosebump factor.
Right.
Do you ever miss it? That part, that the
Oh, heavens, yes. On a couple of dimensions. One, the work was just fascinating. And when you retire, as I did several years ago, you miss having access to the raw intelligence. So when you have a question about current events, you can't go into the vault and pull up the latest information and go, oh, that's what's actually happening, or that was spurious, or oh my gosh, that's much worse than we expected, that kind of thing. And also just the camaraderie of being in a group of people that are all striving towards a greater good, trying to do really good jobs to help the national security of our state. That's that part of being in the military that anyone that's ever been in, I think, misses very much when they leave, is the camaraderie of the people that you know, that you respect mostly, and also the job that you're doing. You feel and know that it's actually very important. And you just don't get that usually as much in the private sector. And that's one reason I do venture capital now, is that you get a little bit of that spirit of we're doing something important, you're in a tightly knit team, you're pushing the boundaries, and you get a little of that magic back.
Yeah, I would agree on the camaraderie. Even though I was not in the military, I was in the Merchant Marine and have a nominal 1,000 days of sea time. And some of the most personal, toughest, and most amazing experiences I had were, Sea State 7 and just working together as a team and recovering a 30,000-pound underwater vehicle. And just the success and there's interaction that's just hard to explain to someone who's never been to sea. They've never been in that position. And Marian, you have some similar experience too, having been a tall ship sailor.
Yeah, definitely. And there are friends that I made in the military, even people I deployed with for just a year, that are still very close friends. And I think you just develop these bonds and these common interests and common experiences that form the foundation for any great friendship.
Yeah, in fact, my old chief engineer, Roger, he's listening, hello. I spent more time with him in the first year of my first son's life than anybody.
Right.
It's an incredibly close experience.
Yes.
Very powerful.
Yep.
Do you find that's the same? Because segue, we can come back to this if we want, but you got out of the Navy and then you started like a really incredible period in your life. Do you find the same camaraderie in mountaineering?
Well, mountaineering and in ocean exploration, they're different. I will always say high altitude mountaineering is the most dangerous thing I've ever done, that most people can't ever do, just because the margin of safety is so thin. You have to really be on your game every second when you're up in the very high mountains, because they're incredibly unforgiving and you're not in control of the environment. And it's very slippery and it's very high, and you make one wrong move and it's a bad situation. So in that environment, you obviously have very strong bonds of friendship with the people that you literally are roped into. These are people that if you fall, they have to catch you. Well, they might come down too, but the issue is you literally are on a regular basis putting your life in the hands of other people in a very visible and physical way. I mean, you do that in the military, but it's not quite so visceral, and you know you're in a very dangerous environment. So it's as close to combat, I think, as I've ever gone to. Going into the death zone of Mount Everest, it did feel like going into a war zone. And you were dying, literally. And if something went wrong, even a little bit, you may not come back. And so thank goodness I've never been in actual combat, but it did kind of feel like that. And that's why you develop those bonds you do. So I have very close friendships with anyone that I've climbed in high mountains with. And that was really good preparation for my expeditions at sea, which weren't as intense, but we definitely had a very strong sense of camaraderie because we were all working toward a very difficult goal, trying to put an advanced submersible into the deepest trenches in the world. And I was not just the leader of the expedition, but I was the pilot too, which is unusual. And that created an immense amount of familiarity and camaraderie and sense of mission, especially when you're living on a ship together for months at a time.
So speaking of the mountaineering, you've done 7 summits. Which was your favorite?
Oh, favorite. It's funny. They can be categorized as the most beautiful, the most difficult, the most unusual. But you said my favorite.
Yeah, because
I would actually have to say going to the highest mountain in Antarctica, the Vinson Massif, was my favorite because it took 2 tries to get there. We couldn't even get into the continent on my first try because the weather was so bad. It's very exotic. You have to fly a jet onto an ice runway in Antarctica. Then you have to take a ski plane to the base of the mountain. Then you have to climb the mountain and then do it all in the reverse. And it was just gorgeous, though. It was like being on the planet Hoth from Star Wars, this ice planet. so exotic and so gorgeous. And you knew that you were thousands of miles away from anyone else. And the silence was, in a way, deafening. But it was a very unusual and great experience. We had a great team. We had a lot of fun. I got frostbite for the first time, so it was bitterly cold. But despite that, it was just a great experience.
And I have to ask about Everest. Been an Everest climbing geek for ages.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Everest was the hardest of the 7 summits, but I would argue it wasn't the most dangerous. Karsten's Pyramid in Papua New Guinea was. But Everest was the hardest just because of the sheer physical brutality and psychological attack you undergo on that mountain. It is brutal. It's 2 months, and you cannot eat enough to maintain your weight. I lost 20, 25 pounds on that climb. And it took me 2 tries. The first time I got frostbite again at Camp 2 and had to go back 2 years later. So it took a lot of dedication because it takes a year to train for it, just to build your body up. And years of training if you want to have any hope of success and not getting killed up there. And, we went up in a storm on my second try to get to the summit. So it was just epic in a way, but we made it happen. We only stayed on the summit for 15 minutes because it was so dangerous. Then we got the hell out of there. So that was the hardest. And Karsten's was the most dangerous because it was simply the most remote. There was nothing there to help you if you got hurt or if you had trouble. At that time, now they usually helicopter to the base of the mountain. We had to hike in for 6 days through the jungle, raining every day, through mud, over raging rivers on log bridges that were just makeshift. It was so dangerous. Even I sometimes was saying, what am I doing here? But we got through. Everyone got wounded on the way out, whether from falling tree branches or falling or something else. So they're all different.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I will never go back to Papua New Guinea.
I've been close to PNG, but not close enough. That's good.
This way, the people that were escorting us to the base of the mountain through the jungle was a certain tribe, the Dani tribe. They were carrying bows and arrows, and not for show. That's what they use to hunt, to fight with the other tribes. And at one point, we were surrounded by an opposing tribe that wanted to extract valuables from us. And so our guides were guarding us in a circle. We were in the middle, and then this other tribe was around them. And I didn't know how this was going to go. And they were yelling at each other a lot. That is not a comfortable situation to be in when you're in the deep, dark jungle. It was right out of Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, they somehow worked it out, and we quietly skulked away. But I was, being the Texan I am, I had my Bowie knife ready to go. I wasn't going to go down quiet.
Yeah, it's a dangerous part of the world, and people don't really quite understand that. Many years ago, I was part of a research expedition, and we stopped in Guadalcanal. In fact, I flew into Henderson Field, which was extraordinary in and of just for me, because I grew up with my dad's stories from the war. But PNG at that time had their own internal battles, and we were informed to stay clear because of internal strife and violence. So it really is a true issue out there to deal with.
Well, not just them. They have guerrillas with AK-47s running around that are trying to achieve independence and going after the copper mine out there. In fact, a pilot was killed, I think, just a couple of years ago, where they were thinking about taking him hostage or doing this or that. They captured him, and then they shot him.
Wow.
So it's a very tough place.
Wow.
Yeah, extremely.
Well, so when you were doing the 7 summits, were you doing ocean expeditions at the same time? Were they interspersed? How did that work?
No, they came one after the other. I was very dedicated to high altitude mountaineering for, again, many decades. And then after I'd done the summits and I skied to the poles, I said, this is definitely a younger person's game. What is something I can do that's still very challenging, that maybe hasn't really been done before, that will test me in maybe different ways? And that's when I really started exploring deep ocean exploration, because so few people had done it. And then I remember reading about Richard Branson's attempt to go to the bottom of all 5 oceans. He called it the 5 Dives Project. And for a lot of technical and other reasons, it didn't work out. But then I revisited that concept and said, well, if you did it a different way and committed different resources and maybe a different submersible design, yes, I think that this could be done. And so I made the commitment back in 2016 to commission the building of a new submersible that would be the most advanced ever built, and then take it around the world. in a year to dive to the bottom of all five oceans. And maybe a bit ambitious, but I said the 5 most dangerous words in the English language, which are how hard could it be? And I was able to assemble a like-minded crew that wanted to do something extraordinary. And we just bludgeoned through all the difficulties, all the setbacks. I applied the resources. I personally wrote the checks. I didn't have to wait for sponsors. I didn't have to make excuses. I just did what I had to do. And I've done enough in venture capital and business that I knew it was going to be over budget. I knew there would be unplanned contingencies, but I was willing to commit what I needed to get it done. And we did it.
I love that camaraderie and commitment too. The story of the Iowa being essentially saved is also extraordinary. There's almost no money available. Literally, the day before we towed out of Suisun Bay, we had no money to pay the tow company.
Wow.
And miracles kept coming up, and we kept, overcoming those obstacles. And literally, Jonathan and I woke up on the Battleship on a Monday morning and looked at each other and kind of said, now what? We had $10,000 or $12,000 in the bank, and we had a promise of some money, but we had to start from scratch, and we had to build on that dream that we had. So I love the story that you're sharing about just going out and digging in and doing something exciting and worthwhile. That speaks to me a lot.
I have a lot of respect for people that have to raise money to achieve a lot of their dreams, because big dreams take big dollars, and most people don't have big dollars. And I'm very fortunate that I had enough where I could just do that. But it is a grind to go out and solicit funds for a concept that is not someone's own. And it's tough. I think people don't realize just how hard it is to get people to separate from their money for even very, very good causes, because there are so many good causes and so few high net worth benefactors.
Yeah, we learned very quickly we were salespeople, frankly, selling our dream. I used to take people down inside Broadway on the Battleship and carry 2 flashlights and just inspire people with a long view on both ends of the ship. And it was an amazing experience to do that, but tremendously tough too. A lot of respect for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So back to this, because I'm trying not to bombard you with 1,000 questions, but doing what I'm doing. So you got to, the thing that a lot of people want to do in deep diving is Titanic. And I know that came up, sort of consequentially, because it was on the way to one of your dives, and you decided to do it alone. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, diving the Titanic was humorous because we literally were plotting the map from the Panama Canal to the Malloy Deep, the deepest point in the Arctic Ocean, which had never been dived before. And it was almost humorous how that line was right over the Titanic. And we just looked at each other in the chart room and went, well, we got to dive it now, And, we have a submersible that can go to any depth, and we're going right over it, and it's the right time of year. So it's like nature speaking to us.
That's amazing.
No human had been there in 15 years. And so we were going to be able to do the first personal survey of it. And yes, it was probably a bit of ego and curiosity to do a solo dive. But as I've tried to explain people, which sometimes seems difficult for them to get, is that when you dive with someone else, and it is a 2-person submersible, it's a very different experience to dive with a passenger. Your risk profile gets lower. You have to be much more conservative on your dives because you're responsible for the crew first and foremost. Just me and the sub, I wondered what the experience would be like. No one had ever dived the Titanic solo. How eerie would it be? But I was a bit naive too. It was the most dangerous dive I ever did. And that's because the currents are quite strong. They can be up to 1.5 knots, which is the maximum speed of the submersible, which means there are points where you barely have control of the sub. And there are cables everywhere. And that's the biggest danger to a submersible, is getting entangled, because you cannot go outside and untangle yourself. And it was just me and the sub. And I learned really quickly that I had to have my eyes inside the sub to look at the sonar and the instruments, but I also needed to be looking outside for hazards. And you had limited visibility in the submersible. So in that respect, and you're also trying to get as close as possible to get the best video and pictures. So it was a bad combination. But I held it together. I was able to get good footage, do the survey, go to both the front part of the ship and the aft. And after a 4-hour dive, I came up. But I was absolutely exhausted after that 4-hour dive. And I relaxed by watching the movie Titanic at the Titanic, which was kind of fun.
That's cool. How do you control the fear in a dive like that?
It's just habit after time. I've been flying civil aircraft since I was 18 years old, and I think that's great training. And now I even fly helicopters and jets, and I've had a couple of in-flight emergencies. And you just train so much as a pilot. You get to the point where it's not that there is no fear, but it's like you realize it has no utility. You just put it in a box, get it out of the way so you can take care of the problem. Get rid of the ice on the wings. Make your approach steady, this, that, and the other, and you channel it. And same thing happened in the submersible. I did have a couple of emergencies, one or two fairly serious. It was a prototype submersible. You're always going to have issues. I'm a certified test pilot for submersibles. I think there are only about 10. And yeah, I was test piloting the submersible. I was literally trying to find out its extreme capabilities. So that meant I pushed it all the way to the limit. And a couple of times I pushed it a little too far and had to deal with the situation. But we designed the submersible from its foundation that almost the laws of physics would have had to have been violated for me not to come up. Yes, the submersible could get very damaged. It could have all sorts of problems when we got up, but I would come back. And I never really had any fears for my life or significant fears for my safety in the sub. And that allows you to be relatively calm. When you know deep down, you're going to be okay. The sub may not be, but you will be. And that's very unlike climbing on, say, Everest or Karstens, where there were times where I literally knew if I bungle this up over this next section, I'm not coming back. And that's not a good place to be. But even there, you just compartmentalize the fear.
When you were looking at designing the sub, what kind of things were you trying to do that were sort of revolutionary or new?
Well, it was the first submersible that was certified commercially, which meant that it basically had the same safety standards as like a commercial airline. Every submersible prior to that had gone to the bottom of the ocean, the Trieste and Jim Cameron's Deep Sea Challenger, were experimental. Mine, basically anyone could get into it. In fact, I've had 2 heads of state get into that submersible. And people really didn't give it a second thought because we could just show them this is certified to literally, the certificate says it was certified to unlimited depth.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we could do it repeatedly. And I did it repeatedly. And therefore, the construction of it out of titanium for 2 people had never been done before. We had 3 viewports to give good visibility, which had never been done before. All of its predecessors had had just 1. We had foam that was integrated into a frame that was almost impossible to dislodge, which allowed it to come up. We had safeties on the buoyancy weights. It needed excess weight to go down, but then, oh my gosh, what if they jam? Well, it was pretty much impossible for them to jam because they were magnetic locks. So if I lost all electrical power, they automatically would have let go. It's hard to think of how they could get jammed. And even if they got jammed, I could jettison the batteries, which weighed almost as much, that would have allowed me to come back. And there was even a dead man switch. If I went unconscious or just didn't respond for more than 15 minutes, the submarine would have dropped all of its weights and come up on its own. So it had so many safety mechanisms that made it very safe.
Yeah, I appreciate that deeply. Although I haven't done anything on submarine work, I have worked on underwater vehicles down to 3,000 meters, and I've also helped class a research vessel.
Okay.
I understand about ABS and Coast Guard rules and everything else, and the paperwork involved. And there's just you can't get around the rules. It has to work or it doesn't fly.
Yeah, in a way, it was great because it was DNV that actually did the class certification for my submersible. Yeah. They required us to do all these different things, and it made it a better sub. And it was a great relationship. I'll do a shout out to DNV because it wasn't an adversarial process. Like, how can we trip them up or how can we make life more difficult for the constructors? Like, no, how can we work together to make an extraordinary vehicle that is also commercially safe?
Yeah,
and we ended up at the end with a much better design. Now, it added several $1 million to the sub, and it added 6 months of time, as anything worthwhile does. But in the end, we were so happy that we did so because I think it made it an incredible device. Nothing had ever existed like that before. I mean, it went down to Challenger Deep or just short of it in the other parts of the Mariana Trench 5 times in 10 days on its first try. And no other submersible had ever gone down to the Challenger Deep more than once.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we built a hell of a machine. It was great. Good job on Trident Submarines out of Florida that designed and built it, because they did phenomenal work.
I heard you
that's
sold it.
incredible.
Is it still out there operating?
Oh yeah, I operated it intensively for 4 years, and that's when I found the wrecks as well, were in the last 2 years of my ownership. But owning and operating not just a deep ocean submersible, but a full research vessel with landers, sonar, a crew of up to 49 is eye-watering expensive.
Yep.
So I wrote all the checks for 4 years, and then I said, I need to take a break. But I was fortunate to sell to an American billionaire, Gabe Newell, who I think is a great person and very foresighted, that he wanted to contribute to marine science. He seeks no attention, and he basically hired my whole team.
Awesome.
And they're now running it in the Pacific, doing exploratory dives off of Tonga, the Antarctic, in the Pacific Ocean, doing hard science, 100% for science. And that's
awesome.
I couldn't think of a better home for it than those guys.
Are you going to get a chance to use it again at some point?
No, there's definitely a clear break. It was either it's his or it's mine, and sharing ownership, it'd be like sharing custody of a recalcitrant child. Probably not the best idea. My main job was, I never intended on keeping it. I intended on developing the technology, prototyping it, being the test pilot, perfecting it, and then selling it to, I thought, a government. But there were no real takers, but Gabe wanted to buy it, which was great. I'm a technology developer and a pilot. I'm not a marine scientist or marine biologist. I like building things. So right now I'm trying to develop and build what I hope is the most advanced deep ocean mapping vessel ever built, and probably hopefully have that within about 2 years. And parallel to that, I'm trying to develop technologies that I would love to put one day on a next generation submersible that's even more advanced than the sub I dove in the limiting factor. That would make me very happy. Longer range, faster, more power, more reliable, more science capability on the actual submersible. That would make it truly a 4th generation submersible beyond the 3rd generation that was the limiting factor.
Forgive the quick side trip, but I knew people at Submarine Development Group 2, Subdev Group 2, that's how we call it, and was able to tour the DSRVs many years ago. And they had the moon pool there on North Island and so forth. And I remember the Seacliff and the Turtle, and I think Seacliff was still operational at 20K. Is there anything in the Navy arsenal at all now that goes that deep? Or
not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
No, what was surprising to many people, and a little bit to me, was that the Navy never approached me proactively about anything we were doing. Diving in the trenches, the technology. I know they have a lot of other priorities, but it has been a little bit unusual that they really expressed no interest, when China has developed its own full ocean depth submersible, the Fenju, and they've been taking it all over the world, doing science and also showing the flag as they do. And right now there are only 2 full ocean depth submersibles in the world, one owned by the Chinese government and the limiting factor.
Whoa.
By the way, I'm having a moment. I met Walsh when I was working at USC. I've now met 2 people of a very small select group that have been to the bottom of the trench.
Yeah, before we dove
Cameron,
in 2019, only 3 people had been to the bottom of the ocean. Don Walsh, Jacques Picard in the Trieste, and then Jim Cameron in 2012. And then I went down, and then I just started taking a whole lot of other people. So
That's
now
amazing.
22 people from the West have been down, and I have reports that about 15 Chinese have been down in the Fenju. So now 35 people have been to the bottom of Challenger Deep, which is now more than have walked on the moon, which is something I was hoping to actually achieve.
That's awesome. I love this
that.
stuff. Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, and I was able to take down the first woman, the first person, male or female, to go into space and go down to the bottom of the ocean. That was Dr. Kathy Sullivan. I took down the first Micronesian. Challenger Deep is actually in Federated States of Micronesian territory. I took her down, a very young PhD student in marine biology. I was able to take down the first person of Asian descent yes, I was very happy that he was from Taiwan, and things like that. So I was able to do, and I took down the former president of Palau for the first descent.
Awesome.
Yeah, Raymond Gasal, the first descent into the Palau Trench. So I made a point that if anyone's going to go down to the bottom of the Palau Trench for the first time, there should be someone from Palau on board. And he was really excited to be the person invited as a former president. So it was things like that. It wasn't just about marine biology or geology or wreck finding. There's also a soft power component, I think, to marine exploration if it's done correctly. And I was doing it completely on my own volition, which I found surprising because the government just kind of, okay, whatever.
Yeah, we find it interesting too. We've actually had a very close relationship with TICA, the Taiwanese, for lack of a better term, their consulate in LA. They don't really have a consulate, but and every year we get to go to their version of July 4th.
Yeah.
I've met one of their past presidents. We've had them aboard. We've flown their flag. It's been really a unique experience to chat with them and spend time. It's really a wonderful thing. And just like you, we don't have any connections with the State Department. We're just doing it on our own and being friendly and welcoming.
Yeah. I don't think the Chinese mainland were very happy with me because since I took down Dr. Y.T. Lin from Woods Hole, who is from Taiwan, they could not say when they finally got to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, I think 6 months later, that they were the first Chinese. Otherwise, they would have to admit that Taiwan is not part of China. So they were annoyed, I'm pretty sure.
I appreciate that annoyance.
Yeah.
That's good.
What is the coolest thing that you saw in the Challenger Deep?
Well, coolest is a vague term. I'll give you two answers, or three answers. The first is the most unusual, strangest, cool thing was a stalked ascidian. It was the strangest creature we ever found on any dive. It was in the Java Trench, and we're convinced it's a new species, but it looked like a bulbous head, but like a jellyfish, but it wasn't flapping like a jellyfish. It was just kind of floating like a dirigible, but it had a cable, a biological string at the bottom of it, and it was moving, and it moved towards a lander and then did a right angle, 90 degrees, right in front of the camera and went the other way. Like it smelled the bait on the lander, realized it couldn't eat it and went away. But we saw no obvious means of propulsion. It was just strange as hell. So there's pictures of it on the internet, and most people go like, what the heck is that? I don't know. And even my chief scientist said, I have no clue what that is. So that was kind of fun. But the other two coolest things I saw, frankly, especially as a Navy guy, were the two wrecks. Those were, in some respects, the most exciting dives I ever did, because finding shipwrecks on the deep ocean seafloor, I can't convey properly just how difficult it is. They're very, very small in the vast expanse of space, and they blend in with the terrain very well. And you can only see 40 meters visually and 100 meters with side scan sonar. So it was tricky to try and find them, but we did. And when you finally start to see their outlines coming out of the murk, and then you see these hulls, and at those depths, they were pristine. There was no growth on them. It was very emotional and very intense in a good way. And then to see, the first wreck we found, the Johnston, seeing that bright white 557 on the hull and confirming it was just unbelievably intense.
Yeah, the stories are so incredible. It's just, they're mind blowing. And like to quote someone I met, who does that? Who does that?
Yeah.
I love that statement. It's just so uncommon now.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Love the inspiration. I too have mowed the grass, so to speak, but not quite at that depth.
Yeah.
We have laser line scan technology and so forth.
Well, yeah, the problem below 6,000 meters, which both wrecks were, was that ROVs and AUVs, they don't exist that operate below 6,000 meters. That's why by Robert Kraft and his Vulcan team, they could not find the majority or confirm that it was the wreck of the Johnson that they found several years ago. They couldn't go down deep enough. But the limiting factor could go to any depth. So in a way, we used the manned submersible as an AUV. We mowed the lawn in a much more tightly constrained area because of, crew fatigue problems and electrical power. We can only do it for 4 or 5 hours at a time. So we had broader search areas and search patterns, but we just had to be much more methodical about the historical analysis on where to dive. And even then, we got a little bit lucky. And we were able to use a combination of the sonar, search pattern, historical analysis, and we got close enough to be able to pick them up.
That alone is extraordinary. Having worked in deep water, I've towed vehicles at 5,000 feet, which isn't even quite 2,000 meters, and it's a huge challenge. And that was a tethered vehicle too. So hats off. I mean,
thank you.
It's, for me personally, I get it very much.
Yeah, I like to rib my friend Dr. Bob Ballard a little bit by saying, he found the Titanic, and hats off to him. He got to mow the lawn. We didn't. And the wrecks that we found were 2,000 meters deeper, and they were about 1/5 to 1/10 the size, and they were not in two parts. So it was a challenge, and I'm very, very proud of the team that did it. I was just the pilot, but there was a lot of homework behind that to make it happen.
Just to make sure people know, we're talking about the Johnston and Samuel B. Roberts, the Sammy B, that went down during the Battle of Samar in Leyte Gulf.
Right. Yeah, the two deepest shipwrecks ever discovered.
Yeah, the imagery was extraordinary too. It gives me goosebumps. It really does. I grew up with those stories from my father. He was on a battleship during the war and was in all of those places, more or less, in various times. And so I appreciate both the history and the technology behind it. That's
well, as I often said after we discovered them, and I was interviewed a lot, I said the thing I'm most happy about discovering the wrecks was not the record or what have you. It was the chance to tell the story again, which 99+% of Americans just have no idea what those individuals did, and they need to hear that story because, yes, it's a little bit of rah-rah patriotism, but there is a place for that. People need to know what other people sacrificed in our history to preserve our way of life and to fight tyranny and all those other things. And it was a great opportunity to do it, and I'm glad we were able to do it, and I want to do it again.
I have two questions to follow up with that. First one is, was that the inspiration for you to go and find them? Or like, what was it that really drew you to those two particular ships?
Well, in many respects, it was kind of happenstance where we were diving in the Philippine Trench. No one had ever gone to the bottom of the Philippine Trench before, and it's one of only 4 10,000-meter trenches in the world. I think it's the third deepest trench in the world. So I was with a Filipino marine biologist, so he and I went down together to the very bottom for the first time, which was awesome. And we were only a day steaming away from the battlefield off Samar. And I was able to create an extra week in our schedule. And I said, just like the Titanic, we got to look for these wrecks because we can. Nothing else could. There was no other submersible that could go beyond 6,000 meters to look for these wrecks. And we had a decent idea of where they were. And so, I spent the time, wrote the check, and said, we're going here. That was one of the wonderful things about having your own system was I could literally wake up one morning and say, I want to go over here and dive in the ocean. Nothing could stop me. In fact, it was in waters that I didn't even need a permit. So, sure, why not take a look and try and find it? And we did.
So, second question, what do you think we can do to get stories like this out there more widely?
Well, it's tough because you can't really control the mass media. Best you can do is put stuff out on social media and hope it gets picked up. But unless there's something extreme about the story, like in this case, the deepest wrecks ever, it was part of a huge battle. The story behind it was extraordinary. The captain of the Johnston was the first Native American to be awarded the Medal of Honor. You had the Johnston being hit by the largest battleship ever constructed, the Yamato. I mean, it's like the Titanic story, but a military version. So it caught on, I think, quite well. And then you had the little Sammy B. Roberts, which was a little destroyer escort. And it's like the little engine that could. They call it the destroyer that fought like a battleship. Another great story that people could get into. So there has to be, it can't just be, here's an interesting wreck from World War II. Here's yet another submarine that we found off the coast of wherever. Yeah. There has to be something that's interesting that people can identify with or want to learn more about. And then the best you can do is try and, put it out there and have it get some traction, because at the end of the day, now we live in an age where the most valuable commodity is attention, and everybody is fighting for it.
Don't we know? It's amazing to be in Los Angeles The ship tied up there on June 9th of 2012, and I still think that only 20% of the populace there knows we're around. It's incredible. There's so much information out there and so much you have to kind of cut through and fight through.
Right. I'll be quite frank. I'll be brutally honest. I did not know that the Iowa was docked in Los Angeles until about a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give Bob a hard time when I see him next.
Yeah. The only one I know, of course, is the Missouri out in Pearl Harbor, because I got one of my ranks pinned on me there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, I got my last rank, my commander rank. I was pinned on by the captain of the USS Constitution in Boston.
Very cool.
On the gun deck, which was just awesome.
Yeah. That would be my favorite Navy ship for obvious reasons. Nothing personal, Iowa. I love you too. So, you have talked also about people not necessarily doing as much with their lives as they could. What advice do you have for, if you want to start breaking out of your box and trying to do extraordinary things like you have?
It comes down to simple common sense things, which is make time to do things out of your comfort zone. I think as human beings, our primary motivation is first to survive, and then it's to become comfortable. When people get even halfway comfortable, there's this natural gravity to become even more comfortable. When I think a different vector would be put some time, some money, and most importantly, energy aside and commit to doing something out of your comfort zone. I tend to do the extremes, obviously, but other people can do things like run a marathon or join a charity. Do what you do, Mike, which is to invest a lot of time, energy into preserving history with the Battleship Iowa. Do something maybe a little bigger than yourself, or that is very much about yourself, but significantly improves you. Learn another language. Do something other than just the regular thing every day. And I know it's hard because people have families, they have other commitments, but life is about prioritization. And that's why I constantly say that people can actually do a hell of a lot more than they think they can if they just manage their time and their energy better. Put the phone down, watch less TV, focus your interactions with people so they're more meaningful and dense. Sports are great, but my God, do we spend so much time obsessing over sports when what really comes out of that? Unless you're playing things of that nature. And I get the tribal nature and that it has a psychological benefit to people, but try to prioritize your life a little bit better so you can have a richer life.
Thanks for saying all of that too. I've not even come close to what you've done in my life, but this is my third startup company, and it takes a special kind of nutcase to do that, I think, and I've loved it every second of the way. Two of them were, kind of science or history related, and the other one was a green energy company, and just absolutely love them. And we took the risks to go do those jobs and, follow those interests, and I just loved every minute of it. To do what we did at the Iowa is the most tenuous thing I've ever done. We quit our jobs and said, we're going to go take a chance. And so few people get to do that. Sometimes, we need the inspiration. We need people to step out and start to really look at what they can do.
If there's one defining characteristic I've seen of Americans, I'm sort of objective about this, God forbid, I'm a Texan, but I've lived overseas a lot. I'm pretty conversant in a lot of different cultures, their mindsets. What really separates Americans apart is that we are adventurous. We are very eager to go off and do things that are unconventional. I think that's what makes our economy and our people so dynamic. And it's why so many people want to come here. You can try new things and be successful. And if you fail, it's not just, oh, that's fine. It's almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
In America, people are like, wow, you actually tried. Oh, yeah, okay, maybe it didn't work out, but you're brave. And in many cultures, that's not the case. You don't rock the boat. And if you fail, it's a mark of shame. And it's one thing that is underappreciated in America. And I think it's one thing that, to tie it back to the military, that makes us so effective eventually in warfare is that when you get our dander up, we're usually not good out of the gate. It takes us a while to learn the trade again and to get organized. But heavens to Betsy, when we do, and we always do when we're committed, we see it through to the very end. Now, modern wars notwithstanding, those are very different conflicts that involve insurgencies, and I have a whole different speech on that. But in conventional warfare, if you ever really engage the United States and we're in it for the long fight, heaven help you.
Yeah. I think I'm pleased, proud father moment too. Forgive me both, but my younger son is a Naval Academy grad. I found out that he'd actually applied when he was 16 years old or 17 and had to fly back there. I didn't even know that he had done that. He took it on himself.
Wow.
So tremendously proud and just really fun to see young people, and so many of them at the academy or the other service academies, to do that extraordinary thing and taking that chance and applying.
That's great. It's great to see. And then there's, I think, a resurgence, people that want to serve and go into the military, which is a great thing. It's amazing that we have a all volunteer military, for the last many decades, and many countries do not. And the fact that we're able to attract really good people, some of the best people I've ever known have been in the U.S. military. And it's great that we're able to sustain that.
So what is inspiring to you these days? Now you've done all the oceanography, you want to do the mapping. What else is inspiring you?
We're just inspired by other people that I know that are doing other things. Every year I go to the Explorers Club annual dinner and I get to meet my tribe, all these other people that are working other vectors of exploration, whether it's going into the deep rainforest of the Amazon or biological surveys in the Arctic, or developing high altitude aircraft powered with hydrogen, or doing things in the ocean like Inkfish that bought my submersible. We tend to feed off of each other. And that's one thing that's very inspiring to me, are the new wave of modern explorers. But really, my biggest inspiration comes from the people that I read about when I was younger, the great explorers, Amundsen and Scott and Shackleton, and even the ones before that in the 15th century. Those were extraordinarily brave people that were really pushing the boundaries of their technology and achieved major milestones in exploration. And I just, in a very small way, try to live up to their incredible precedent.
I believe you have.
It's very kind. I would never say that I have, because they were not dealing with the capabilities that we have today. But I do my best.
That's good.
Mike, you got anything? I've been dominating in the questions here. I literally wrote a list out so that
No, I'm just commenting and enjoying it, and just I keep going back personally to the inspiration that we've all found. Whether it was the National Geographic magazine sitting in the back of this little barber shop when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, up through in 8th grade I was allowed to go to the Long Beach Naval Shipyard on a special tour. Only 30 of the kids were able to go on the bus that day down in Long Beach. And just wandering through and seeing the machinery and the processes and the dry docks, and just being stunned. And all of that led to where I've been now, 25 years in the nonprofit world, real sea time, a year of sea time in the Mediterranean, in the Gulf, Trans-Pacifics, Transatlantics, just amazing experiences. And it's all triggered by that inspiration. That's what I just think about that all the time.
Well, for me, I was a voracious reader when I was younger. And one of the very first science fiction books that I read was Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh my God.
And then I got to see the Disney movie with James Mason, and I was just completely entranced.
Yeah.
I didn't become an ocean explorer overnight, but I guarantee you that seed was in the back of my head. And when I had the opportunity, like going, well, let's build a submarine and take it around the world, there had to be, a boyish part of me that was like going, yeah, finally. And, I think science fiction for me, actually, I think is one of the most underrated pieces of literature that we have in our culture. It's not studied in universities, which I can't believe.
Right, yeah.
It's not celebrated more. And yet, how many times have you heard of extraordinary engineers on the Apollo program or the creators of Star Trek make things that they only had imagined that propel us forward as a species? Science fiction shows the way. Because if something doesn't violate the laws of physics, it's literally a matter of engineering and resources and time. And that's so often what people that really love science fiction are doing. We're trying to make these things that these authors came up with in their minds, making them a reality. And I am very proud that I think we sort of did that with my submersible in our round the world trip to dive to the bottom of the oceans. It was kind of Jules Verne-esque. And I remember reading the book again, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, while I was on expedition. In fact, I finished the expedition reading the book, and I couldn't believe how much of a coincidence it was that the amount of time that Professor Aronnax, the protagonist in the story, the amount of time he spent on the Nautilus in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was about 10 months. That's how long the Five Deeps expedition was, almost to the day. It just blew my mind.
That's cool. Yeah. I put myself through college. I went back to school in my early 20s to pick up my mechanical engineering degree. And I remember haunting the libraries, looking for research and submersible books of every type. Just loved it.
There aren't many.
Yeah, I know. I found every one and just enjoying all of it. So to meet you and to be involved as I've been off and on, just in little ways with the industry has been extraordinary for me too.
Yeah.
No, I thought that too, because we were not, I was a voracious reader as a kid too. We were not allowed to watch TV very much at all. And one of the few things we did was Sunday night reruns of Jacques Cousteau. And
of course.
Yeah, I used to sit on, we would go swimming constantly in the summer, and I used to sit on the edge of the pool with my back to the pool and flip off it like I was a diver going off the Zodiac, and actually grew up and didn't have any scuba gear, but did the little flip off the Zodiac from the small boat of one of the boats I was working on, and I was like, oh, look at that. I did it. You know, I actually grew up and did it.
Right. Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, one of my favorite movies now is The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, because I have actually lived that experience, parts of it, you know, with the interns, with, you know, the drinks on the high deck of the ship, on giving tours of the ship. Like, I mean, it was surreal sometimes. We did not carry Glocks, but we did have the red beanie
I was going to say, did you do the red beanies?
We definitely did the red beanie caps.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
Great.
Well, Victor, gosh, thank you so much for spending time with us. I want to finish with 2 questions that we're going to ask everybody on the podcast this year. And the first is, what about historic ships, especially Navy vessels like Iowa, makes them important, worth our attention, and imperative to preserve?
I think that historical Navy vessels are critical to providing a physical manifestation of the extraordinary history of the Navy, of our country, and most importantly, the people that served on the ships, why they did it, the commitment they gave to this country. I gave a speech for Veterans Day just last week to a high school, and one thing I said was, veterans are people that take personal responsibility for the defense of the state and its people. And that does separate them from the 94% of Americans that did not serve. That's not to put them in front of or to say they're superior. It's just saying it's a choice that we made. There was a compulsion to protect our state and its people. And the ships are a physical manifestation of that. You cannot get on something like the Battleship Iowa and not feel moved by its massive turrets and also appreciate the people that made that ship work and how they spent months at sea protecting our liberty and our way of life. And that's why I think the current museums are wonderful, because then people get to literally touch and feel and experience the ships. But finding the wrecks is also important, because there you see what happened to them when these people gave everything, including their lives, to fight in battle. And it's hard to turn away when you see a wreck with shells from the Yamato in it and knowing what they went through. So I think that they provide an integral series of threads in our fabric as a nation to remind us of what we need to value and what those who came before us value.
Yeah. Second question, we just talked about all of us being voracious readers, so what are you reading right now?
No. Well, I never read just one book at a time. I have to spice it up with different ones because they're different topics. But yes, the books I'm reading right now, one is the Sea War in Korea. It's a history book about the naval war in the Korean War in 1950. I'm a voracious reader of military history. The first book I ever checked out of a library was a military history book. I was 6 years old. I love the maps. Another book I'm reading, I think 4. I'm reading a French textbook. I'm trying to become more fluent in French, which is one of my first languages, and it's always good to get even better. So that's part of that skill augmentation that I think people should always do in their lives, always be learning something new. I just started a new book on more ancient history, the Habsburgs, about the Habsburg Empire in Europe. I love reading history about how different countries and empires rose and fell, the personalities involved, because every great personality in history thought like they were the most important person in the world. Sometimes they were. And yet they all ended up in the same place. They all ended up in the ground. And what did they really accomplish? It's interesting to see those biographies and, how things evolved in their time. And then the 4th, it's a book about welding, because I'm trying to learn how to weld.
That's awesome. I love that. We've got like one of the books on the table downstairs right now is about Roman aqueducts.
Well, some of the greatest engineering feats of history.
Extraordinary. Yeah, just love it. Architecture, and I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, but really fascinated with all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm a machinist. I build steam engines for fun. I play with trains. I'm sorry. That's what I do.
Don't apologize. I've got a 2,000 square foot workshop in my own house behind me where I make furniture, pens. I'm welding some things together now, all sorts of things. I think it's a wonderful thing for people to learn how to make things.
Yeah.
We've gotten a little bit too far away from that, which was, I think, a bedrock of American culture. Mm-hmm. But being able to get a wrench or a welding torch, some woodworking gear, and make something is not just emotionally satisfying. I think it gives people a sense of confidence and self-worth when they can actually make things happen. If they break or if they just need something, they bloody build it.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel very blessed to have those skills. Deeply, deeply blessed. So
we lost my uncle earlier this year at 97 and a half, and when I would ask him what kept him going so long, it was both always learning something and working with his hands, because he was an architect and a carpenter and all that, and just keeps you going.
All good.
Yeah, and you take that too far and you end up building a submersible.
So any final thoughts you want to share with our audience here?
No, anyone that's watching this has a great affinity for Navy ships, Navy history. I just would encourage them not just to continue that passion, but to try and instill even a little bit of it in others, particularly younger people. They need to know the history of our great country and try and get out to the museums, because there's nothing like experiencing the ships firsthand. And I think that people remember it. Little kids that, like I did when I went to the Battleship Arizona, I still remember it. I don't think we fully appreciate how much these unusual memories in younger people stay with them their whole lives. And you don't really know what impact it's having, but I don't think it's negative. I think it's only positive.
Yeah, we actually very much agree. I can't tell you how many mariners I found that their first experience was coming aboard a ship like that. It's absolutely true. So very much.
So well done, and thank you for everything you do for the Iowa and the overall community. It's a good thing, even though if it may not be fully appreciated by the country, it certainly is highly valued and very important.
Certainly a project of passion and commitment, and also very rewarding too.
Yep.
By the way, congratulations on your Freedom of the Seas Award. Thank you so much for being out aboard the ship, and a tremendous honor to meet you, and just a privilege to talk. Very much feel connected, and I appreciate that very much.
No, thank you for the incredible honor, and it was a privilege to speak to such a great group.
Yeah.
And make fun of the Marines at the same time.
Well, thank
Marianne,
you so much.
You're the closer.
Yeah, we're going to leave it right there. Victor, thank you so much, and we'd love to stay in touch and chat with you again sometime, and best of luck with everything you're doing, and just keep on doing it.
I'll keep doing my best. Go Navy, beat Army.
Yeah.
Go Navy. Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.
Take care.